Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock. My name is Diana Jameson, and I am honored to be your service leader this morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey of faith, you are welcome here. As we begin, I invite us to ground ourselves in our shared covenant. We, as members of this fellowship, come together to create a welcoming community of diverse people who search for spiritual meaning in our lives. We listen to each other. We speak our truths. We respect ideas and beliefs that are different from our own. We take responsibility for our words and actions. We strive to be compassionate and loving with ourselves and with others. And we promote social justice and serve all in our community. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within us and among us, a light of truth, of love, and of connection. May it remind us that even in times of questioning or uncertainty, something sacred continues to glow. Before we speak of Indigenous Jesus today, let us begin with the ground beneath our feet. This land, with its rivers and birds and centuries of human story, has carried the prayers, sorrows, and songs of Indigenous peoples long before any of us arrived here. In many Indigenous traditions, the holy is not far away. Creator is felt in the wind and water, in animals and stone, and in the web of relationship. That way of seeing is very different from the Christianity some of us have been handed, where God felt distant and Jesus was used more as a boundary than as a bridge. Today we wonder together, what happens if we let these two streams meet? If we listen for Jesus not as the mascot of an institution, but as a human being deeply connected to the land, to the community, and to the spirit. A relative on what some Indigenous translations call the Creator's good road. May something in us loosen, and may a different kind of conversation begin. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, lay minister Marlie. On a lifetime of exploration in Western, Eastern, and Indigenous spiritual traditions, she shares stories that illuminate our shared humanity and invites a spirit of compassion, connection, and community. This early spring Easter Sunday morning, Marlie invites us to explore a different way of meeting Jesus, not as a distant religious figure, but as a wounded, deeply human companion who knows exile, betrayal, and beginning again. Through story, parable, and Indigenous wisdom, she invites us to consider how even the hard-packed soil of our experiences becoming fertile ground for a quieter rebirth of the sacred, Please join me in welcoming Marlie.
Well, instead of doing a reading this morning, I wanted you all to hear the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, his language at the time, because it's really beautiful. So I thought we won't go into, I'll have you listen to it. Inside of your bulletin is the prayer, and you'll see that it translates very differently. In Aramaic, the first word, which is abun, often translates as our Father, but is meant as birther of all that is, father, mother of the cosmos. It names the Holy One who is not a distant authority figure, but the living source from which all life flows. And with Debois Shemaiah, it usually is rendered in heaven, and this is the realm of light or the subtle dimensions that interpenetrate everything. So you could look as you're listening to what the translation is, and we'll go straight into the reflection rather than interrupt that. So okay. So yes, we're going to look at Jesus through an indigenous lens this morning. And I want to start with a simple truth. The name Jesus does not land the same way in every heart. Some of us were loved and lifted by that name. Others were wounded, controlled, and made small in its shadow due to the church. Some of us left churches to save our own soul. If that's you, know that your doubt, your disillusionment, your grief and anger are not barriers to the sacred. They may be the doorway through which a truer faith enters. Today we're going to look at Jesus through a different window, an indigenous lens that sees him as a true human being, walking close to the earth and close to those who are on the margins. But first I want to remember the wisdom that shaped him from within. Long before anyone spoke the word Christianity, the Jewish tradition was already praying with the holy. Wise, relational, and not distant. In Proverbs and in the wisdom literature, there is an ancient figure of Sophia, wisdom as a feminine presence. She is intimate. She speaks the language of streets and kitchens and fields, meeting people right where they are. This matters because Jesus was born into that world. He emerged from a spiritual imagination already alive with wisdom, attuned to the holy as more relational than rigid, more tender than controlling, more interior than institutional. If we listen closely to the parables and reversals, his fierce compassion and his uncanny ability to cut through illusion, we can hear the echoes of Sophia, a quiet knowing that rises when we become still enough to listen, guidance that comes not as domination, but as invitation. What the point many of us feel toward religion is not a detour from the sacred path, but the place where the path begins again, the ground from which a truer faith for us can grow. Former pastor Jim Palmer once said that after leaving his megachurch, he found a non-religious Jesus that even an atheist could back. Palmer writes, Jesus shows up not as a system, not as an institution, not as a theology to be defended, but as a human being who refuses to stand between people and their own freedom. No dogma, no authorized intermediaries. Jesus didn't preach belief systems. He embodied a way feminine. He chose presence over performance, compassion over compliance, courage over belonging to something, whose message became, God is up there and you have to go through us to get to him. It asks us to look again at the human being before he was made into a symbol, a system, and over time, something really quite tragic. But when we look again at the human Jesus in the Gospels, especially through the Indigenous lens, we see something very different. We do not see a man building an institution. We see someone who wants to free people and hand their humanity back to them, who keeps collapsing the distance between the holy and lived experience, touching and healing those labeled unclean, blessing little children, eating with outcasts, listening to those who had no voice. Someone who stood in radical solidarity with those crushed by the system and had no patience for those who benefited from it. Someone who trusted the truth more than tradition and love more than law. That is why he was intolerable to the powers of his time. He was not greasing the machine. He was quietly dismantling it. He exposed the version of God that was engineered to keep people under the thumb of control. A God used to soothe anxiety instead of exposing it, to reward obedience instead of calling forth maturity, to justify authority and silence dissent. He did not come to found a religion. He came to expose it. Jesus was not a Christian. The Gospels were written decades after his death, formed through memory, interpretation, and the needs of communities trying to understand what his life meant and trying to understand what their own life meant. We can all relate to that. We know very little about his childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood. No stories of awkward teenage years, no detailed records of his daily work, no account of his private doubts or ordinary mistakes. Perhaps the machine wanted to keep him divine, untouchable. What if we saw his humanity as a blessing? What if his vulnerability is not something to overcome, but something to honor? He is not above the human condition. He is inside it with us. The grief many people carry towards the church, toward religion, or toward any institution that is not be bypassed. It has to be named. It does not come pretending that the wound is not there. Healing comes when we allow the tears to rise and move through us. Tears soften what has been hardened. They return us to ourselves. They make room for honesty and mercy. Jesus himself knew tears. He wept at the tomb of Lazarus. He did not stand apart from grief as though it were beneath him. He entered it. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he was overwhelmed. He reached for a cup and the comfort of his friends, and they fell asleep. He knew what it was to feel abandoned, betrayed, to stand in the dark with no easy answer and no quick rescue. Many of us know those cries. Betrayal of people that we've trusted, misunderstandings by family, rejection by communities that claim to speak for the sacred. We know the ache of asking in one form or another, "Why have you forsaken me?" And because Jesus knew the same ache, he becomes like he becomes less like a distant religious icon and more like a companion on the path. If Jesus is rooted in the same divine life that roots all things, then perhaps we are not being asked to become less human in order to be holy. Perhaps we are being invited to become more perfect, yes. Tender, yes. Mortal, yes. And still sacred. A Lakota elder once told me, sometimes the places that break our hearts are really doorways. Sometimes what hurts us most is secretly carrying an invitation to return, but in a new way. Sometimes what wounds us most is also what wakes us up. Over time, I began to wonder whether the teachings of Jesus, the human Jesus, have always been one of those doorways for me. Perhaps it's time we take him down off the cross. Let me offer you an image, kind of in parable form. A small stone lay for years in the dust of a busy road, kicked and ignored until its edges grew sharp from passing feet. One day, a child picked it up, carried it to the river, and dropped it in without a word. Season after season, the water flowed over it. Storms and stillness, winter cold and summer warmth. The stone only remained there, held by the river. Many years later, another child found it. Its edges were smooth now. It fit in the child's palm, cool and quiet, as though it had learned the shape of being held. And here's the mystery. The stone did not plan its path, nor did it make the river flow. Yet over time, something larger did the shaping. Jesus knew that. Not hammer strokes, but dance of the water sings the pebbles into perfection. And each of us is a pebble. We're not polished completely yet. We're not yet finished. But perhaps our lives are being shaped not by force, but by the patient waters of mercy, grief, time, and love. Carl Jung came to see Christ as an archetype of the self, the image of a fully integrated human being in whom opposites are held together. In that light, Jesus is not just one more teacher. He is a living symbol of wholeness, a kind of first fruits of individuation, whose story keeps unfolding in the psyche now. Notice Jesus almost never gives abstract lectures. He plants symbols, parables, questions, images into the imagination. When Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you? Who do you say that I am?" Not just he is the person's own intention, an inner image, inviting the healing movement to arise from within rather than being imposed from outside. It is as if he is constantly sowing living symbols into the collective and personal unconscious, seeds, yeast, treasure, lost sons, wedding feasts, trusting that they will work from the inside out, each in its own season. He had faith in each of us. Like Sophia, who was described as a healer and comforter, Jesus' healing was often relational and compassionate, restoring wholeness to those devalued by patriarchy. Mary Magdalene, in some Gnostic traditions, is seen as the human embodiment of Sophia, and Jesus' primary spiritual partner, the one to whom he offers his private teachings, honoring the feminine intellect and spirit. From the beginning, the story of Jesus has been a translated story. The First Nations version is one such translation, bringing the New Testament into the storytelling patterns and relational language of Indigenous people. In it, God becomes creator or great spirit. Son of Man becomes true human being. The kingdom of God becomes the Creator's good road. When First Nation storytellers speak of the Creator's good road, they are not promising an easy journey, but a way of walking, step by step, in humility and courage, where each choice moves us closer to relationship with Creator, with the land, with one. The vocabulary changes. Part of life, healing, belonging, and relationship. That matters because decolonizing Jesus is not about inventing a different Christ, but clearing away layers of empire, supremacy, and control that were never his to begin with. It is about letting Indigenous and other marginalized voices help us hear him again as a true human being, a relative, a companion on the good road rather than an instrument of domination. Sometimes when we hear the word indigenous, we think only of particular peoples and nations, and rightly so, because living indigenous traditions deserve honor, not appropriation. But the root of the word also points to being sprung from the land, born in a place, to belonging with earth, water, people, and spirit. In the broader sense, Jesus appears shaped by land and history. We hear it in his parable. He seems at home in the world where the sacred is woven through the ordinary. So when we listen for wisdom in our own hearts, we are listening for the old longing to belong, just as we are. To become whole, to live in reverence, to be in right relationship with one another and with the earth. Sense the Creator's good road, a path of humility, truth, tenderness, and courage. It is not a path that bypasses grief. It passes through grief. Deny the damage religion has done, but names the damage honestly, and this is key, and refuses to let it have the final word. It is not a path of easy certainty. It is a path of trust and faithful becoming. And perhaps that is what makes Jesus so compelling when we let him be fully human. One who knows our tears, one who honors our questions, one who is willing to walk beside us when the road feels too long, for he knows the way of Sophia, the feminine, the river of life. One way says, by his life more than by his words, that love is still worth the cost. He was always a messenger and is a messenger of love. So today, may we begin, maybe for the first time, to reimagine Jesus, to decolonize him, and to not let patriarchy or dogma have the final say. And so on this Easter morning, there's another thought that comes to mind, another story, the resurrection. Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb while it's still dark. She sees Jesus and does not recognize him. She mistakes him for the gardener. It is not his face that opens her. It is his voice. He speaks her name, Mary. And in that moment, something rises within her to meet him. I've begun to wonder if seeing him as the gardener was not a mistake at all. Mary saw Jesus not as a distant savior, but as an intimate companion, alive in every awakened heart, a sower of seeds, and the one found among those planting and those quietly keeping love alive. There has been talk of the second coming. Perhaps in some way it is also about the awakening of the divine in our own hearts. For Mary, she hears her name. Something comes alive in her. She is resurrected, called, known, and named. A new self is born, almost like the mystic's image of a virgin heart, emptied of old certainties, able to receive a new birth of the holy within. Maybe this is our Easter invitation too, to see the divine gardener in every face, to let ourselves be called by our true name beneath all labels, to remember the land as a feminine gateway into stillness and deep listening, and to become as receptive as a hollow reed, a simple vessel for the love that longs to move through us. And I want to close with this. The moment that a belief becomes a substitute for thinking and for questioning, the moment belonging requires self-betrayal, the moment certainty is purchased at the cost of awe and wonder, we have been led astray.
I just want to publicly present the award for first sermon that made me cry publicly. I think it was very fitting, and I came up with a good bumper sticker, a few, but this one is more bumper stickery, funny, and then I'll say something more serious. We may be tender, but we are not chickens. So that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, and I really loved the just no patience for those who benefited from the system. I think that truth is out there and truth is in there. You know, we know that truth is there, but it takes a lot of courage to truly look at every single action and be radical the way that Jesus was. And I've long considered myself a Jesus person. I just don't always. There is still a lot of pain there, like you said. Yeshua is a word that's sometimes easier to say and hear.
Yes.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage. And with everything going on in the world, I still see many people doing more of the same. And it's like, guys, like, wake up. Anyway, I was out there and I wanted to express gratitude for your sermon, and I had to take a minute, and I got hungry, and like every now and then I'll eat unhealthy, like enriched stuff that's like poison that people don't necessarily acknowledge, and that's fine, and like no judgment at all, like, but I was able to go outside, and I had a burger, you know, for Easter, and it's like, oh, it's unhealthy, but it's whatever. Anyway, not gonna ramble. I went outside and I had some flowers, which are God's green earth and the gardener. And anyway, I'm very grateful for Jesus, and I'm very grateful for Easter, and I'm very grateful that you guys don't keep a lawn that's poisonous. So thank you for doing that, so I can provide forage for edible flowers. I don't really have anything else to say other than the courage.
Yes, thank you.
Finding the promised land and all of that is within you. And that the systems of control after his time, during his time, saw the opportunity to play upon people's fear and to control them using, but that's not where he was going with any of it. So Jesus is just all right with me. You know, he was a sandal-wearing hippie, and I'm all about him.
Yes, it was.
I love you, Marlie. I have never heard what you put together and shared, except for I've heard it everywhere. And as I pay attention to the voices that connect the world and those that are helping us from other places, what you just said is so truth. It just resonated in terms of truth. And so thank you for reframing that story of Jesus. It's moved my heart. Thank you.
I think it's often important to reframe any story that is not working for us. You know, that's about when we're suffering, is there a story we can reframe and see it from another side? It's not to bypass, but it's to reframe, the Indigenous and like the Schwarz that I was with would be shape-shifting. We can shape-shift, and if the stories are causing us pain, it deserves a deeper look and it deserves a reframing that's closer to your own truth. Yeah. Thank you, William.
As we leave this place, may we remember that the sacred is not far away, that it lives in relationship, in land, and in one another, and within our own hearts. May something in us remain softened. May something in us remain open. And may love quietly, steadily shine its light in every corner of our lives. May it be so.